Okay, why don't we go ahead and begin? Welcome to Midwest Dairy's Health and Wellness Understanding Growth Opportunities webinar. As you may know, Midwest Dairy partners with a wide variety of premier market research firms. Today's webinar will be led by Lynn Dornblaser. She is Mintel's Director of Innovation and Insight. Mintel is a global leader in market intelligence that specializes in understanding what consumers want and why. Lynn brings more than 35 years of market knowledge to her work at Mintel. Since joining Mintel in 1998, she has applied her unique perspective on the market to numerous custom tailored research studies, as well as extensive public speaking. Lynn has been quoted by a variety of US news organizations, including the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times. I invite you to ask questions through the Q&A feature throughout the presentation, and we will address them at the end. And then after the webinar, we will send you a link to the presentation as well as the recording. So let's get started.
Great. Thanks, Maureen, and welcome everyone. And first off, let me apologize for my fashion accessory that I have on the back of my neck at the moment. She just needs a little bit of attention. She'll hop off at some point, but the slides are much more interesting than looking at me anyway. So it's great to be here to be able to talk about what we see going on with dairy, with a big focus on health and wellness and sustainability issues and things like that. So to go ahead and jump right in, what I want to do today is to start off first by talking just for a minute about the trends that we've identified that go across all categories and are global in scope. Then from there, we'll move on. We'll talk a little bit about what's going on in terms of product introductions in the US, some of the trends we see, examples of products, that sort of thing, and what's going on when it comes to health and wellness. And obviously, too, some insight about what it means for dairy products. One thing I want to say, you're probably familiar with us, Mintel. We're a global research company, as you heard, and have all kinds of data. Everything that you see in this presentation comes from our Mintel data. But to start things off, we can talk about big picture trends, we can talk about categories and all of that, but there's something that's absolutely essential to understand about consumers. And that is taste is what's most important to them. That seems really obvious, but I think sometimes people forget that just a little bit. So when we ask consumers what are the characteristics that are most important to you when buying food, these are the responses. And you'll see that I've broken this out by generational group, and it shows some really unique differences, one of which I didn't really expect, and that is when it comes to taste. Younger consumers, a little less of a focus on taste than older consumers, as you can see. Nutrition, convenient preparation, following doctors' recommendations, those of course skew older. But I think this gives you a really good sense of, in general, what it is that's important to consumers today. And just keep in mind, always, it's about taste first. So let's talk just for a second about the 2023 trends that we've identified. Mintel has two sets of trends. One is about consumer behavior. The other is about food and drink. We have others as well, but these are the ones that are of interest for all of you, I think. So I'm going to talk about them just very, very quickly. And one comment also, for those of you who are clients of Mintel, you'll notice when you get a copy of this presentation that there are links here and there. You can see how that one is showing the link. There are links throughout this presentation. If you're one of our clients, if you click on that link, it takes you to more data. So really quickly, our 2023 global consumer trends. Now, big picture trends don't change a lot over time, but what changes is the expression of those trends. So what we've got here starting off is what we call me mentality. So that's all about consumers want to focus on themselves. Not a surprise there. We've done that to a certain degree through the pandemic, and that is continuing. What we also see is what we call power to the people, and that is consumers are being consulted more when it comes to product creation or co-creation. Hyper fatigue, we're getting tired of the fast pace of daily life. With this being Mental Health Awareness Month in the US, for example, that's a really good illustration of how that's playing out. It's all about the role that brands can do. It's all about helping consumers unplug a bit, help them feel a little less overwhelmed. Some of that can be accomplished through conveying information about your products and what the benefits are so they don't have to do it themselves. International localism, that sounds like one of those really odd phrases, doesn't it? But what we see is consumers really thinking carefully about what values are important to them, what good value means to them as well, and finding the right ways to spend their money. And then the last one we call intentional spending. So again, that's about finding the right way to use the funds that they have and to spend them properly. Now we've got a bigger group of food and drink trends, and these again are ones that are interesting twists on some of the things that we've seen going on for quite a long time. Minimalist messaging, clear, simple communications, links back to those big picture consumer trends. Tell what's important about your product and do it in a clear, simple way. Savvy sustenance, that's about providing good nutrition at a that is also a good value, which might be low cost, but isn't always low cost. When we talk about adaptable cooking, that means helping consumers being able to do it on their own a bit, giving them shortcuts so that they can plan meals easily and efficiently and pivot when they need to. Unguilty pleasures, well, that's all about having a little bit of a treat. Really making it okay to have something that's a little bit indulgent. Staying sharp is about mental performance, and I think it feels like we all need that these days. Now, this one at the bottom of the middle column is the one that is the oddest. This idea of cosmic comforts. Here's how I interpret this one. Products that talk about space, that talk about sometimes even some with a science fiction focus, that sort of thing. Think of Coca-Cola's unique flavors that it's had recently. One called Bite, another one that it wasn't called Space, it was called something really similar to that. It's all about something that is a little bit different, a little far out, open to a lot of interpretation. Kind of like those unicorn frappuccinos we saw a few years ago, right? So just something that's a little bit fun and different and looking far into the future. The last two that we see here, though, are really about sustainability, about resources as well. Number one is the worth of water. Consumers are becoming a bit more knowledgeable about water use in products and are asking more questions. So it's a good opportunity to provide information. And the last one there is about weatherproof provisions. So that's about helping consumers navigate crazy weather with products that can run the gamut from grains, for example, that are more heat resistant, more drought resistant, or products that last longer, so more longer shelf life products. So kind of all over the place with those trends, but I think it's important just to talk about them just a little bit. So let's talk about dairy, since that's what you're most interested in. So we're going to take a look at what we see going out there in the marketplace, and we'll take a look at some key parts of the dairy market as well. So first off, it's important to take a look at new product introductions. Now, let's be clear about what we're talking about. So this is all dairy product introductions, and it includes dairy and plant-based alternatives. Those plant-based alternatives tend to be alternatives to milk, yogurt, cheese, ice cream. Not quite in that order. Cheese is the smallest of all of those. But this gives you a sense of what we've seen going on in terms of new product introductions. So this is the number of new product introductions in the US in each of the last 5 years. And in looking at this, a couple things to keep in mind. The new product introductions include completely new brands or products from completely new companies. That might be what we would call true innovation. It also includes a wide range of what we might call renovation, which includes line extensions, so new flavors to existing lines. It also includes packaging changes, which could be package size, or format, or material, or package graphics. It also is products that are ones that are relaunches. Don't see a huge number of those, but we do see those. So what's interesting is we look at that breakout, we see that innovation, so new brands, new companies, has remained fairly steady over time. Those other parts that we might call renovation, those are the ones where we've seen a bit more variation from one year to the next. Now, let's dig a little bit deeper into all of those subcategories that live within that broad category of dairy products. What you see here is new product introductions shown, the subcategories shown as a percent of the total. So the largest of the subcategories is cheese. Now that's every kind of cheese, including plant-based, but every kind of cheese that you can imagine, from cream cheese up to some unusual hard cheeses that come from small dairies, for example. But cheese accounts for close to 40% of all introductions. What comes right after that is dairy-based ice cream and novelties, as you can see. And then dairy-based spoonable yogurt in the green. And then we begin to see much smaller numbers, as you can see there. There is a group at the very end in the pink that's all other, which is going to be things like cream, and I don't know, there are a few other bits and pieces in there as well. Well, I did break out butter so that you could see that very specifically. But nevertheless, what we see when it comes to those three biggest categories, so cheese, dairy-based ice cream, dairy-based spoonable yogurt, is we see a lot of variation in terms of flavors and in terms of formats, and that boosts the total number of product introductions. So I wanted to take a few minutes then and talk about some of these categories, to talk a little bit about what we see going on in the categories themselves. Let me offload the kitty. There we go. Okay, now I can sit up straight. So when it comes to what we see going on with cheese, in terms of total product introductions, blocks and wedges have seen fewer drops in new product introductions as opposed to some of the other formats, sliced, for example. But we do see a lot of innovation across the board when it comes to cheese. The Andrew and Everett one that you see there, a sliced mild cheddar, that's a regional product, I believe. It talks about taste, but it also talks about its wholesomeness, what it doesn't contain, that it comes from humanely raised cows, which is language that you see over and over again. The Philadelphia product is quite simply a whipped Philadelphia cream cheese, as you can see there, and it does a great job at conveying the experience. It talks about a light, fluffy experience. One comment about that. So that's talking about the texture of the product. And what I find so fascinating across all types of products, dairy and otherwise, is how few products actually talk on pack about the texture of the product inside, when that's something that consumers are looking for. So something to think about when it comes to on-pack communication. Now, digging a little bit deeper into cheese, this gives you a sense of cheeses that are plant-based. So ones that are those plant-based alternatives, and the claims that we see on pack. So looking across all cheeses, dairy and plant-based, what you see here is the percent of products that bear any of those claims: vegan, dairy-free, and plant-based. Now, keep in mind, the products can bear more than one claim, and we do see that quite a bit. Total numbers are actually very small when it comes to plant-based cheeses. There have been less than 200 introductions in the last 5 years. But what I see when I look at this is, when it comes to the dairy category, of course, that dairy-free statement is a very important one to have on pack. When we look at other categories, plant-based is the one that is growing even faster than you see it growing here. And a reason plant-based alternatives in cheese are important to keep an eye on is because of those younger consumers, as you see by the data point there. They're the most likely to say that they've eaten plant-based cheeses in recent months. Well, we do know that consumers are looking for new flavors and new experiences. We see that familiar flavors, of course, are important to consumers when they are trying new cheeses. But also, again, it's those younger consumers who are more interested in experimenting with something new. And another comment then about that 67%. So 67% say that they look to a familiar flavor, but they enjoy trying new cheeses. What that is that's combining something familiar, a flavor they know, with something that's brand new. And so the opportunity might be for a cheese type that's extremely familiar to consumers. So let's say a block of mild cheddar, that may be a good place to experiment with a new flavor, because you're combining something that's familiar, what the cheese is, with a unique flavor. And we see some really unique flavors out there in the marketplace. The one on the left is from Canada. The other two are from the US. But the one from Canada is all about borrowing from a completely different category. So it's a mojito flavored cheese with blueberry and lime. So part of a broader line, as you can see there, of cheeses that are flavored like cocktails. With some cheese products, we see uniqueness or variation in how you can prepare it or how you can consume it. So the paneer that you see there can be grilled or fried or eaten as it is. And the Big Moon bacon cheese is intended, like we see with some other types of cheeses, to be heated on its own in a pan or on the grill before eating. And it comes in some other really unique flavors as well. So let's move on and talk just a little bit about frozen dairy and non-dairy. So dairy and plant-based alternatives. This includes everything. It includes ice cream, novelties, the whole bowl of wax here. What we see is, of course, in this category, it's all about the flavor, all about the experience. And you really see that in the two varieties that are on the screen. Both are in tubs, and tubs are most common when it comes to package format in this particular group of products, and most commonly purchased by consumers as well, as you can see by the data up there on the screen. But the Jenny's ice cream maple soaked pancakes, and so it actually has pancakes in it, ice cream with pancakes in it, which is really different. The other one from Gelato Boy is coffee fudge swirl gelato, and you'll notice on the lid there it says vegan. What it also says on the lid, around the other side of the lid, it also says dairy free. So that communicates that message almost as strongly as it communicates what the flavor is. But I think one of the things that strikes me in taking a look at just these two is what a good yet very different job they both do in conveying what the product is all about. With the Gelato Boy using graphics, using text, in a huge way to tell you exactly what that flavor is, but Jenny's using a graphic element, pancakes, to show you exactly what it's going to taste like on the inside. Now, when we talk about frozen desserts, it is important, I think, to talk about keto, and important to talk about keto anyway, because we see so much buzz about keto. Here's what's interesting. First off, claims across all categories for keto didn't exist before 2019. It just didn't appear. When it comes to ice cream, we've seen the numbers drop recently. But what we have not seen happen is we haven't seen a reduced interest in the amount of sugar in products. That being one of the things that you see with keto. Keto products tend to be lower in sugar. It's because of the carbohydrates. So what I take from that is, well, we see consumers being really focused on the amount of sugar, far less so than the word keto. So what that says to me is that the value of what keto is very important to consumers, sugar amount. But perhaps the labeling, calling it keto, is not as relevant to consumers as it has been in the past. But most definitely, looking at sugar, amount of sugar is something that is important to consumers. What we also see is a few interesting shifts when it comes to formats. So recall I said that a cup or tub is the most common format, and you see that here. This breaks out new product introductions in several 12-month periods to give you a sense of what we see going on. And stick formats, as you can see, have been growing, as have sandwiches to a lesser degree, and cones as well. One of the interesting things about cones is, I think, a little mini trend, literally, is mini cones, really small cones. We've seen several major companies come out with those in the market, which really ties to that whole idea of unguilty pleasures, or what we might call permissible indulgence. It's a small treat. We also see a lot of activity when it comes to multi-packs, of course, going beyond cups and tubs with all the other formats. We see a lot of multi-packs. Something that we don't see in terms of multi-packs, especially in the US, that we see a lot outside the US, is single serve cups in a multi-pack. The ones that we tend to see in the US are the ones that are for kids' birthday parties, or a picnic, so not about the premiumness of what's inside the package, but the ease and convenience. Whereas what we see outside the US, especially in Europe, is major companies that have premium ice cream selling multi-packs of individual tubs, which to me feels like, again, an opportunity for the US market. Here's a little bit more of inspiration from elsewhere, and that's formats that are sharing formats. So I've shown the Magnum one here because this is really what we're talking about. It's a tub that has individual bites, that's what they call them for the Magnum products, in that tub, designed specifically for sharing. The Target one, the Favorite Day Gourmet product that you see there, is a little bit more of an upscale presentation, as opposed to it being in a tub and you just pick out what you want. I believe these come in like a tray format. So a little more upscale, a little bit fancier, not intended as the Magnum Bites are to reach in and grab, but is beginning to point the way towards that poppable or shareable type of occasion and product. Again, something I think is a real opportunity for the US. So moving on to talk for a few minutes about yogurt. Well, we've seen some declines in the number of product introductions that are yogurts. We've seen greater declines in plant-based alternatives than we have in dairy-based ones. And I think that's reflective of the consumer data that we've got. 2/3 of consumers say that they buy dairy-based yogurt. 24% say that they buy plant-based. What they buy most commonly is splittable, with blended fruit flavors and single-serve cartons. They answered those individually. So it isn't that the most common is a spoonable blended fruit single serve. Those are the three types that they're most likely to say that they would buy. And these are two very typical examples of what we see in the market, with the Tillamook product being Oregon strawberry, which makes sense for that brand. That the dairy-based one, as you can see. Note at the little pink band that's at the top, no artificial sweeteners. Important statement that for consumers today. The plant-based one, as you see there, is a coconut-based one. We see quite a few that are coconut-based, and that one's a very unusual flavor. It's lemon elderflower. I think another opportunity this time when it comes to yogurt. I think there is an opportunity for dairy companies to keep an eye on the flavors that are showing up in plant-based yogurt alternatives, and to think about experimenting a bit with those flavors, perhaps. Lemon elderflower, really unusual, but something that you see in some cocktails, for example. So something that perhaps could translate to a dairy-based product. What we also see when it comes to yogurt is consumers are looking for good nutrition. In general, consumers want to make sure that they eat more nutritious food and drink. But the best way that yogurt can deliver on that, of course, is high protein. Those who eat yogurt say that high protein is the most important attribute that they're looking for. 31% for all consumers, 37% for men. Men looking, in general, men being more likely to say that they're looking for higher protein products across the board. So a way to engage with consumers when it comes to elevated health values for yogurt is to continue to think about protein. And we see those claims showing up pretty prominently on pack. Comment about Oikos Pro that you see there in the center. I've always, this product has always made me smile in the several iterations that it's been on the market. What you see now, it still keeps its core brand values of being high protein and being in packaging that's black. You know what that is? That's yogurt for men. It's in a black package. It's not pastel and girly looking and all of that. It is a much more masculine focused product, which I think is absolutely fascinating. In the very beginning, the very first ones of these had a very strong focus on male consumers. But that one has a lot of protein, 23 grams of protein. The Cabot Greek one that you see there, a little more of an everyday product, really talking about what's built into it as opposed to being fortified with additional protein. So that one with 13 grams of protein per serving. And we see that as well with the Liberté product, also a Greek yogurt, that particular one from Canada. So also talking about protein. But the other thing that's interesting as well is note how both the Cabot and the Oikos product talk a lot about the vitamins and minerals as well. And you can see with the Oikos talking about vitamin D and calcium for strong bones. So again, a lot of really good health-focused messages in these particular products. Of course, we have to talk about dairy and plant-based alternatives as well, dairy beverages and plant-based alternatives. And again, a lot going on when it comes to this particular category of products. We have seen declines in new product introductions for both dairy beverages and plant-based alternatives. And here's one of the reasons why, and that's because of a surge that we saw in 2020, which was specifically this: white milk, private label, in gallons. There were many retailers who introduced more varieties of their branded products in gallon jugs. It seemed like they were all in jugs, in gallon jugs in 2020. I think the thinking was to help consumers who did not want to grocery shop very frequently. Think early days of the pandemic, the first 6 months of the pandemic, when we were all really concerned and didn't want to get out into stores, all of that. we saw retailers with coming out with more larger sizes. So that's part of what that's all about. But what's interesting is in taking a look at the data, what consumers say that they buy, what we see is about a third of consumers say that they buy dairy milk only, but another third say they buy both dairy and plant-based drinks. So I think the big message to think about or to take away when it comes to plant-based drinks, like you see with the Trader Joe's one there, for example, is that they aren't going away. The consumers are choosing them, but more consumers say that they have dairy-based drinks in the home. What we do see going on with the plant-based alternatives is more experimentation with the base ingredients, and in some cases, inclusions. That's a little bit unusual. You do see that here with the Trader Joe's product. It's an oat and seed drink, for example. The dairy-based products focus more on organic, pasture-raised, how the land is treated, how the animals are treated, and you see that very clearly then on the Organic Valley half gallon. But I think the opportunity for dairy drinks and also for the plant-based alternatives is to really talk about the benefits and to keep in mind when it comes to fluid dairy and fluid dairy alternatives, that there's a lot of opportunity to borrow some of the health values that you might see in other parts of the dairy category. We've already seen that with products that are higher in protein, with dairy drinks that talk about having higher protein levels. That really calls back, I think, to yogurt and to a certain amount to cheese as well. But we are also seeing some fluid dairy products that borrow from yogurt in that they are ones that contain probiotics. And so I would say, think of flavors, think of inclusions, think of size. I go back a million years to the first D milk chunks, if anyone is old enough to remember those, and how that really revolutionized how we drank milk for so many years. So I think when it comes to fluid dairy, there's a lot of opportunity to look across the dairy industry and to see what concepts, health-wise and otherwise, you can borrow and adapt for fluid dairy. And we see that consumers see dairy-based milk as inherently nutritious. You can see 38% say that agree with that statement, whereas only 25% say that specifically about oat milk. So I think that really does drive home the opportunity to experiment more with additional health values when it comes to fluid milk. Now, just a really few quick comments here about butter. I don't know about all of you, but I do have to smile in how the language has changed with margarines now in many cases being called plant-based butter alternatives, or in the case of Country Crock they're calling it plant butter, which is, I think, a bit of a polarizing label. But nevertheless, we have seen drops in new product introductions when it comes to dairy butters and plant-based butters. The plant-based alternatives. We've seen those plant-based alternatives, margarines, we've seen greater declines there. Margarine, for the most part, focuses on those wellness benefits, whether it's being dairy-free. Note that the Country Crock one talks about containing sea salt, which has a bit of a healthy halo, that sort of thing. But what we tend to see when it comes to dairy-based butters is products that take a more upscale approach. So this better butter that you see is called a craft butter even, but it contains black truffles. We also see more discussion when it comes to dairy butters about the butterfat content. And if you are focused on how we've seen consumers baking more at home, those who have gone all in on baking, whether it's bread or sweets or whatever, they are much more focused on the butterfat content of the butter, noting that for some applications, a higher butterfat content yields a better result. So there's clearly room for those upscale unique butters in the market, either to use in baking or as a finishing product like you might for this black truffle better butter. And then there are butter boards. To me, this also was something that was a bit unusual. You know, we've seen so much activity with charcuterie boards and all of that, but now we've seen butter boards. And if you don't know what that is, it really went viral on TikTok. And essentially taking a board and spreading like, you know, swirls of softened butter on it, and then covering that with a variety of sweet and savory ingredients, which you would then scoop or dip or scrape off to eat with bread or crackers or whatever. To me, what that speaks to is consumers being willing to experiment a little bit more, getting back a little bit more into entertaining at home and having people over, having that TikTok worthy video or that beautiful photo that you can take of your butter board to share with all of your friends. And you see that with the social media analysis there. The big spike in butter boards would have been in 2022, as you can see there. So again, just illustrating that even though some may say, you know, well, why would you want to use butter? It's high in fat and saturated fat, and, you know, all of those things that have always been said about butter. There still are butter boards out there. There still are people who focus on the flavor and the texture and the experience. Again, it's that unguilty pleasures term that I talked about in the very beginning. Now I want to talk a little bit about health and wellness, what consumers are looking for in general for their kids and from dairy products. Well, as I mentioned in the beginning, taste drives choice. It's not the only factor, as you saw, but taste drives choice. Consumers are also looking for health. About a third say I mostly select food and drink that contributes to my overall wellness, is across all categories. But also they say that they like their food and drink to contribute to mental and physical health. And when we think about mental well-being, that often is can be about the experience. And what that says to me then is almost any product can have some sort of a health positioning. Either it has a formulation that is good for your physical well-being, or it has an experience that makes you happy. Consumers look for a lot of health benefits when it comes to food. And here we see the ones that are most important to consumers: supporting gut health, losing weight, sleep, maintaining weight, improving mood, strengthening bones. Now, I'm sure each of you can think about how your products can do each one of those things. Talked about gut health with probiotics across almost all dairy categories. Helping lose weight, helping maintain a healthy weight. That's about satiety and good nutrition. And clearly, dairy delivers on that. Helping you sleep better. Well, I think hot cocoa before bed is like the original help you sleep better, isn't it? Which also can be thought of as improving mood, as can every single treat dairy product there is. And strengthening bones, obviously built into what the dairy category is. So I think the point to take away from that is there are a lot of things that are important to consumers when it comes to health benefits, and dairy can deliver on virtually every one of them. I love this slide. I talk about this one all the time. We ask consumers to self-identify as you can see, omnivores, carnivores, flexitarians on down the line. And you can see on the screen there on the left-hand side definitions of each of those. What we see is that most consumers eat animal-based products at least some of the time. The older you are, the more likely you are. What you want to take a look at for those who eat animal-based products is the purple, which is omnivore, they eat anything. The blue, which is carnivores, which are meat eaters, the self-identified meat eaters. And the green, which is flexitarians, which is they eat meat and plant-based, lean a little bit more towards plant-based. But what you see is that across all consumers, it's about 80% eat meat at least some of the time, eat animal-based products at least some of the time. This particular question was focused a little bit more on meat and meat alternatives, but you can extrapolate that to include it to really help inform your thinking about dairy and dairy alternatives. Vegetarian, that there are a lot of levels of vegetarian. You could be an ovo-lacto vegetarian, meaning you don't consume animal flesh, but you do consume eggs and dairy. You could be, there are others as well, I always forget them. Pescatarian, vegetarian, but you eat fish. Vegan, absolutely no animal products whatsoever. And just keep in mind, 3% of consumers identify as vegan. That other, by the way, is mostly, I don't follow any diet plan, or I don't really want to say. What we also see is that consumers want it all. They want to manage their diet, they want more nutrition, and they want treats. They want both of those things. We might call that, when you put all that together, we might call that permissible indulgence. Note also that about 20% say that they would pay more for better quality food and drink. Now, keep in mind, that's what they say. That isn't always what they do, but they're willing to consider it. They're willing to consider paying more for more nutritious food and drink. Now, I've talked a lot about how dairy can engage in health and wellness in a lot of different ways. And this happens to be one particular product that has a lot about it that really does that. It talks about the simple ingredients. So to consumers, that often conveys health. It talks about purified water that's blended in small batches. That also conveys wholesomeness to consumers. But then it goes beyond that. It isn't just about the formulation. As you can see, as it says there, the stick for each one is printed with like a kind deed. So something for you to go do. And then also you go online to the company's website and talk about what you did and all of that. So that makes it a community thing as well, all about making the world a better place. So this particular product does take a really interesting, very holistic approach to this idea of well-being or wellness. Now, just a couple final thoughts here. First off, I would, as you can see there, keep an eye on that big picture. We see that, as I mentioned in the beginning, those consumer and category trends vary from year to year to a certain degree, but the biggest picture is consumers want benefits that are easy for them to understand, benefits for themselves, for the planet. They're looking for fair prices, meaning products that deliver on their promises and are priced accordingly. And especially in this category, something that's a little bit unique. I think the dairy category really is made for fun and flavor across every type of dairy product. And we know that consumers like to experiment, they like to try new things. And it's those younger consumers, especially millennials, who are most likely to say they go out of their way to try new flavors. That's the way to keep consumers engaged with your products. And then, I talked about permissible indulgence just a second ago, but that really is about talking about the built-in goodness of your products, the positive nutrition that any dairy product can provide, the treat aspect, that idea of permissible indulgence, the mood lifting aspect as well. So there are a lot of different ways to talk about health when it comes to dairy. So I hope this has given you some insight into what we see going on, and I hope it's given you some ideas of things to think about as you move forward with new product development and think about ways to capture more consumers. So with that, I'll say thank you very much. I'm going to stop sharing and we can take a few questions. Okay. Do we have any questions?
I am not seeing any questions in the chat or in the Q&A. I guess I would have a question though. So with protein, we know that that's been an ongoing trend in food for probably what, over a decade even. And it's still growing according to most of what I'm seeing, including in this presentation. Do you think that that's another decade of growth, or like, is that something that we can bank on in the dairy industry as a driver?
I think you can bank on protein as a driver. Absolutely. I don't think we'll see the relatively meteoric rise that we've seen in products with added protein, all of that, quite simply because there's so much already on the market. But I think one of the unique positions that dairy has is dairy products can provide good levels of protein without additional fortification. And that includes ultrafiltration that we see in a group of products as well in dairy. But I think simply talking about the protein that is built into what the product is, that it's inherently in there. You haven't added anything to it. It's a really clean, simple formulation. To me, that feels like that's one of the strongest messages regarding protein that the dairy category can be thinking about.
Great. Anybody have any questions or things that they would like to get clarification on?
Well, I would say that if questions occur to you later, once you get a copy of the presentation, you probably saw it on the screen a second ago, my email address is there. So do feel free to just drop me a note if you've got other questions or if you're wondering more about the data.
Great. Thank you so much, Lynn, and our Mintel team for the great content. You can also reach out to me, Maureen Windish, at midwestdairy.com. You'll find my contact information there, as well as Martha Kemper, and we're both very willing to help you dive into this information deeper or other topics you might be interested in. Thanks so much.
Great.
Have a great afternoon.
Thanks, everybody.